I am having a good day. How about you?
It's good. Yeah. Um, it's about 300 degrees here, so there's that.
Where are you?
Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna be in
Yeah.
Houston
Are you
next.
in? Oh, you are? For a
I'm
for an
gonna
event?
be in Austin also for my book tour. I'm doing a gig at Book People.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. That's a great story.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
there in September. I want.
Yeah. So it's nice. You look like a perfectly presentable man, and here's this monster on the back of your door.
Uh, that's a Nazi zombie that
Hmm.
is it's a target for shooting practice. And I
Yeah.
went.
Okay.
Are you a comic book geek at all?
Yeah. A little bit.
So Ethan Van Sciver was my artist on Batman: The Dark Knight, and we
Uh,
went shooting, and that's of course the backdrop that we chose. So I shot the
yeah.
hell out of that Nazi zombie because if there's two
Cool.
things I hate, it's Nazis and zombies, and if you combine them, it really makes for the perfect target.
I mean, of course. Um, so let's see. So let's get you to keep the computer where it is, but can you approach us a little bit more, a little bit closer to us?
I might have
Yeah,
to
that's
slide
great.
because big
No, that's
old desk.
perfect. Yeah,
Better.
yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Uh, so was really happy to see this book is set where it is because I spent a summer learning Spanish in Puebla
Oh,
and
okay.
left the program early for a week to go to Mazunte.
Nice.
Um, little, I'm sure you know, a little village close to Huatulco, about 45 minutes away. So um, when you go on book tour, please don't reveal that place because it's my little, like, it is only for me. No one else knows about it. So
You don't want to turn it into the Cinque Terre of Oaxaca.
right,
Okay.
precisely. Um, so we'll talk for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll edit this down to about the best 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll run
Okay.
this at the date and help you get out the word about the new thriller.
Great.
Uh, so going back to that, I mean, tell me why the Oaxacan setting.
Well, I have a very weird thing. Being like a Jewish kid from Northern California who does not like camping, I absolutely love the jungle. So I spent time in the Amazon. My second book takes place in Galapagos, but I snuck time on the mainland to go into the Amazon. And I had in my head, I love those like sweaty jungle thrillers. There's something I love about that. And I just thought there couldn't be anything to me more terrifying and primal than a woman who's completely out of her element and she's in the jungle in the middle of a tormenta. The storms in Mexico, as you know, can dump a meter of rain in a day. I mean, it's a whole other level of a storm. Being pursued by a very bad man who also happens to be a survivalist. So I love telling these stories about every man, in this case, and every woman, Eve Hardaway, who are just up against odds that seem insurmountable. So here she is. She's the single mother. She's a nurse from Calabasas, recently divorced, and she goes up to this little eco lodge in Oaxaca and slowly comes to realize that she has to do things she never imagined she'd have to do to get out of this symbolic and literal wilderness if she ever wants to see her son again. And I just thought the setting matched it so graphically and sensually.
Yeah, no, it's great. Um, and so what, I mean, did you have to go down there, or what kind of research did you have to do?
Oh, I do a lot of front row research. I mean, my theory is always that if I can't, if I always want to give the reader a front row seat to the action. And if I haven't done it myself, I don't know all those specifics. So I was down there. Nearly stepped on giant snakes. I went through whitewater rafting runs, class 4, really dangerous runs through the jungle. I hiked through ruins. I came upon the sweeper ants, where there's a million of them in a band, and you have to jump over them because they eat everything in their way, every living, every cricket, every worm, every mite, and they just march through the jungle like this. I went horseback riding on the beach, through the jungles. I learned how to make mezcal. I drank a lot of mezcal. And so a lot of it for me is I have to get down there and really see and know that environment because that's what I want to bring to life. And, things will happen that will work their way into the story. So, I remember we were about to launch on this class 4 whitewater rafting trip. We're up in the middle of nowhere. And the wilderness and the jungles get really dense up above Huatulco. And we were just about to launch, and this unidentified wasp came and just stung me on my eyelid. And so I have this giant cartoon swollen eye. And in Mexico, this does not elicit sympathy. It elicits everybody making fun of you, for being an idiot gringo. And so we're launched down, and I can only see out of one eye. It's completely swollen. And so, you just come across things and things, the way the air smells, the way that it feels, the animals you come across, the insects, the wildlife, all of those things had to be part of this book because I wanted it to be a sweaty, intense jungle thriller.
Yeah, we did a great job. Earlier this year we interviewed Michael Kurita for his this novel set in Montana, Those Who Wish Me Dead, and it's very much about survivalism. And so I asked him, how, because that novel is very specific about how this little kid, teenager, survives in the Montana mountains, and what the author had to learn about survival techniques. It sounds like you sort of went into that as well. Is that right?
Well, I did a lot when I was
to learn.
As you know, the setup of the book is basically she's this single mom. She's a one-time nurse from Calabasas, and she wanders off from the group and sees a very bad man doing something that is unusual, and he sees her see her. And so a lot of the book becomes, because I'm me, this does not go well for her at all. And so a lot of it was in the research for him. It was more around building his character and then the things that she observes both for what he does and also what the locals do, because it's not just sort of she's in this little tiny eco lodge, and it's not just the Mexicans who run the lodge, but it's a lot of the local the indigenous peoples who are also running it, who are the ones who do the dishes and do everything else, and she sees them and she's seeing their tricks and how they live in nature. And so she's picking it all up. So she doesn't have any natural skills. Again, this is one of my sort of everyman thrillers. I like writing in that Hitchcockian tradition in a way. But she's smart and she's perceptive and she's culturally perceptive. And she's also on the wrong side of the gender balance. She's in a group and in a culture that doesn't value women's voices to the same extent that they might be valued elsewhere. But from her position, she's learning to find her voice, and she has an advantage in that she's smart and she's willing to learn.
Right. And it's nice that you mentioned Hitchcock, because actually this book made me think a little bit of North by Northwest.
Okay.
Because in that movie, you've got this ad executive, Cary Grant, who, charming, kind of innocent guy, but you also learn in the beginning of the movie that he's a little tough. And the same with Eve, she's innocent enough, but you as a writer have to establish that she's going to be challenged, but that it's not going to be unduly mean to throw all these challenges at her that you're throwing at her. So you as a writer, you have to balance that kind of innocence with this sort of underlying understanding that she might be able to handle herself just fine. Is that a difficult thing to pull off?
Well, so much is about selling. If it's just an everyman who has a dull collection of characteristics, then no one's that interested, And so, yes, there needs to be a template of skills. So Eve's a nurse. Being a nurse is very, very useful. I didn't make her a super high-tech surgeon, because I wanted to maintain that veneer of sort of accessibility. But nurses are tough. Nurses are tough and smart and see a lot and deal with a lot. And that was a very useful backdrop. I also mentioned, though it's not any sort of focal point of the book, that she used to be quite an aggressive soccer player and athlete. And so part of what this book is about is really about her refinding herself. It's not just about her discovering herself and being put to tasks that she couldn't possibly imagine. But, the book opens with her hearing that her husband has had an affair. And that's the opening chapter, basically, after the prologue. And a lot of this is, 9 months later, she goes on this trip to try to rediscover herself. She's been worn down from the grind. I think at one point I said, her whole life is shrunk to 3 exits on the 101, like work, the gym, and home. And she's in this grind, and I feel like we've all felt that way at different times, that we're just sort of in a rut. And she goes to try and find adventure and to try and find herself. And, of course, it takes shape in a most unlikely and much more menacing form than she would have wished. But the story ultimately is the story of her finding that unbroken part of herself that's always been there and finding that voice of herself that she's always had. And I think that more than anything is what I love to write about with characters, is where there's an aspect of self-discovery. And in her case, it's recovering. Like she was saying, having been kind of worn down in this marriage, not that it was an abusive marriage, but just being worn down with the parenting and this marriage that seems to have stalled out, she just lost track of who she was. And she's finding that step by step as all of these challenges are thrown at her. And there's so many times she thinks she just can't do it. And I love those stories.
Yeah. And so I noticed that your books, you kind of have, a variety of settings in them, and you, seems like you're successful enough to write a series, but you haven't written a series. Is it, is that because all the different settings you want to keep things fresh for yourself as a writer?
Well, I did write a series in the middle. I wrote a series of books called the Tim Rackley books. Okay. And I think this is my 14th book, and those were 4 somewhere in the middle, which I loved. I think it's weird because it just depends on which. I don't make sort of a marketing decision. I'm saying, here's a book that I'm going to write because this is going to be a game plan and it's going to work in terms of, what this brand is. I have to write what it is, the story that's kind of banging at me. And since the Rackley books, I think the stories that have occurred to me are very unique. They're very contained. And one of the advantages of a standalone is there tends to be more research. I have to reestablish a person, where they live, their relationships. I have to do a lot of research about what the setting is. It's often a new city or a new area. But one of the advantages is you can pick someone up wherever you want, and you can leave them off wherever you want. There's no consideration for that. And so, with Eve, for instance, it's like we open with her learning of a divorce. She's going off to this eco lodge, and this whole thing happens to her. And it would be something of a contrivance if all of a sudden she goes on her next trip. It's like people joke about Taken with Liam Neeson. It's like, how many times are they going to take this guy's daughter? At a certain point, just take someone else's daughter. And so with Eve, it would be a bit of a contrivance to turn that story into a series. I love series, and I really enjoyed working on them. And I'm a big fan of Thomas Harris, Robert Crais, Lee Child. I love what they do, and I loved working in the Rackley books as well. But I think for the specific stories that have occurred to me over the last run of books, I want to pick someone up exactly where I want to, and I want to leave them off where I want to. And the structure and the energy of that character and story demands that it be self-contained.
A lot of writers I talk to say that plot is the hardest thing to pull off well, and you're sort of, I looked at the reviews of your books, and everybody sort of makes a note that you're very good at plotting. Is that a difficult thing for you too?
No. I mean, plotting for me, I think I'm a bit of a structure slut. I love things that are structured out well. I studied a lot of Shakespeare, and I think Shakespearean tragedy, if you look at it, is really nothing different than what a thriller is. It's highly narrative-driven, highly convention-bound, well-structured tales of intrigue, murder, lust. Those are what the Shakespearean tragedies are. And I never took those writing classes of learn story in 2 days. I never did all that, but I think I learned a lot about story. I was a voracious reader. And it's like, if you want to learn about how story and plot function, read 2,000 books. And then you start to have a sense of where does the pacing need to turn? Where does the structure need to turn? For me, the more challenging part is is to find that collision, those perfect moments where a character moment coincides and lays exactly onto the plot where that twist happens. You know, so in Don't Look Back, there's a moment where Eve first starts to find her voice that's an essential moment, because if she doesn't find it there, the whole plot would veer in a different direction. And so knowing sort of the plot and the story and the structure, for me, I feel like those things can be taught and learned fairly easily, whereas really trying to get the richness and get at the marrow of character can be more challenging sometimes. And also, you know, dialogue, getting dialogue. Dialogue is different every single time. Every line, every voice. So there's no program that can spit out dialogue for you.
Yeah.
Oops, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing.
Oh, that's okay.
Let's just let it ring through, and you can edit that out, right?
That's great. That's fine.
Sorry.
No. You have a totally legitimate excuse for ignoring that phone call.
All right, be gone. Okay, cool. Back to us. Back to our quality time.
Yeah, so coincidence and character and dialogue are just as difficult as, or more difficult than plot. That makes total sense to me.
I mean, I find it that way. I'm sure other people have, you know, have differences. You know, again, it just depends. I tend to just have a gut sense of how plot functions and what needs to happen, and spend a lot more time on really massaging and knowing character, you know.
Yeah. And so you don't have to outline, or what's your writing process like?
You know, it's funny, I've been all over the map. So I started off not outlining at all. Then I outlined more and more and more. So by my 6th book, I had like a 73-page outline that I knew every twist and turn. And then I realized when I was writing the book, I was getting bored, because I already knew what was going to happen. And that's a very bad sign, because if I'm bored, it means the reader is going to be bored. So I just throw a lot of it away. And now it's sort of a mix between the two. I mean, I tend to know, I think of the story as, you know those indoor rock climbing walls? Have you ever seen those with the different handholds?
Yeah.
So I tend to think about it as, like, I have key scenes. Like, early on, I know that there's going to be this scene I can grab hold of, and there's a toe hold that's going to be this, and a big reversal that's here. And there's enough of those big scenes that I can sort of see my path across the wall. You know, the wall being the narrative as it unfolds. I don't know exactly what order. I don't know which hand I'm going to grab what with and what needs to switch around. But I need to know enough of the grouping of these different scenes to get me through.
Yeah. And so, last question, what's next for you?
A couple things. I've been working on some TV pilots, which we should be announcing soon. I've been doing some work on a feature script of mine that I wrote. It's called The Book of Henry. That we're nearing. You know, I've been polishing that and getting that ready. I'm doing that with Sydney Kimmel Entertainment, and ideally and hopefully getting close to misuse the word hopefully, to getting close to getting that out to talent. And on the book front, I've been thinking really seriously about returning to my first series since I created Tim Rackley in 2002. So after running a whole string of standalones, I'm sort of getting that call to live with a character longer than just for a year and a half.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job with this one, so congrats on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we will, as I said, we'll air this at Pub Date and help get out the word about the new book.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Have a good day, Greg.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Bye.